HAARP Experiments happening now. Hey, everybody, Rex Bear Leak Project. How the heck are you? So I always love it when I go out with, a friend or an acquaintance, and we have like completely different opinions on certain things, right? Like I don't surround myself with people that agree on everything I say because first of all, I don't think there's anybody out there that agrees with everything I say. And, it's good to have contrast, right? So, and it just is the way that it is. But the other day I was hanging out with a good friend of mine and we were talking about contrails and geoengineering and weather modification. And, this person says that all chemtrails are fake. There's nothing like it. It doesn't exist. And, I'm like, okay, well, challenge accepted. So I think it's all about the way you reference certain, well, like contrails. Most of the time people look at the sky and they see these trails from the back of planes that turn into clouds and dissipate, and you get this nano haze. A lot of people, they don't think that's normal. They say, hey, that's some type of chemtrail. Well, verbiage once again, but it's a contrail coming from an airplane. And when there's a lot of radiation, especially like with a weakened magnetosphere, the radiation somehow, once it hits the contrail, it kind of turns into a cloud and a haze and it gets overcast. And then people notice the X patterns and they're like, well, why are there so many X's in the sky? Why is it all X patterned? And then that X turns into a cloud. Well, first of all, flight control, they have specific paths that they have airplanes on to keep people as safe as possible. But with that said, I definitely think there's experiments going on. And I definitely think there's a lot more than just contrails. And I think there's more than just silver iodide that's launched with rockets to help create clouds, which give roughly 5 to 12% better chance of rain, more rain if you have cloud cover already. So I want to share with you some very interesting documents that I found and patents that are related to weather modification, weather weapons, military applications, commercial applications, and HAARP is doing experiments right now. So cloud seeding, it's real. Everybody knows about cloud seeding. I think there's even a website, weathermodification.org, that's been around for at least a decade because I remember looking at it 10 years ago. And there's different operations and programs for weather modification, which is typically cloud seeding, where they're launching rockets with silver iodide. But is there more? We're going to talk about that. And we're also going to look at some experiments that HAARP is doing right now. HAARP is doing experiments now through the 22nd. They've done a plethora of experiments throughout the year. So we're going to look at some of the experiments that they have done. We're going to deep dive into some of the conspiracies. We're going to debunk a lot of conspiracies because a lot of it is nonsense. But what if there's some like gems that are secretly hiding through the BS? And that's what I want to talk about. So the first article that I wanted to show you is directly from HAARP. And let me pull it up right now. And yes, they did do weather modification projects during Vietnam. That's Project Popeye. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But there's a lot of speculation about what HAARP is and what it can do. And a lot of the stuff that people think HAARP is doing, it's not. And another reason I went deep into the dive with HAARP again is because there's been a lot of nonsense on social media claiming that HAARP is somehow creating the aurora borealis in the lower 48 states. And that's just not possible. It doesn't have that type of power. So I'm going to say right now, that is completely nonsense. But it's fascinating what HAARP can do. And HAARP isn't the only facility that can heat the ionosphere. There is a multitude of facilities around the world, different governments that have technologies to heat the ionosphere, and we're going to look at those. So, but this is directly from HAARP. This is what HAARP is doing right now, and they're doing a high-frequency active auroral research program that's going to be conducted through the 22nd. And you can see the dates right here, the frequencies that they're launching into, or that they're blasting, I should say, the frequency that they're blasting into the ionosphere. These are showing the frequencies right here, the experiments. So you can read all about it. And, if you want to learn how to read the chart, there's actually like a 10-minute video you can watch. It's about 10 minutes that'll show you how to understand the charts and what it means when you see the red and the green go up versus a curve. And they're sending frequencies to the ionosphere. And if the signal comes back, they track the signals that come back. And then the signal that leaves the ionosphere, that's when you see the straight up come like that, because that's not bouncing back from the ionosphere. It's actually going through the ionosphere. One of many experiments, just a quick introduction if you didn't already know that, and you probably already did. Here are some different campaigns that HAARP has been a part of and different programs over the past few years. You can click on these individually and look through these. HAARP can change the aurora locally, so it can, but it's not hundreds or thousands of miles away. It can create a bright artificial air glow that's visible in a 20-kilometer spot at an altitude of 120 kilometers. While the effect is limited to a small specific area, the air glow may be visible from up to 300 miles away, depending on atmospheric conditions and elevation angles. HAARP cannot change the aurora over large geographical distances. So I would, once again, if you think that you're in Colorado and the reason the sky is red is because of HAARP, it's not. HAARP's ionospheric research instrument transmits high-frequency radio waves into the ionosphere. This energy stimulates electrons in the ionosphere, causing them to emit light, similar to how solar energy creates a natural aurora. The experiment creates luminous spots in the ionosphere at altitudes between 70 and 85 kilometers, which is about 40 to 50 miles approximately. Scientists can see these results with the telescope, and they are sometimes visible from the ground as faint patches of red or green light. I'm going to show you some images. This right here is actually a light beam, nanu, produced by the new LiDAR emerging from the dome of the SGO at Gakona. Pretty cool. So this is a paper from Nature, creation of visible, artificial, optical emissions in the aurora by high power radio waves. This is what some of them look like. This is an image right here. Then you've got this. Pretty cool. I think this is from the experiment in 2009. When was this one? 2013. Yeah, this one's from 2013. Here's some more images. These are 3 different images from the HAARP telescope showing bright rayed structure on the 100-meter scale. A 1-kilometer scale is shown in lower right of the first image. The rays appear to be field aligned, and these images were exposed for 1 second at the 557.7 nanometer range or spectrum. Artificial aurora produced by HAARP. So here's some papers, and they're pretty good. Large ionospheric disturbances produced by the HAARP HF facility. This is pretty cool. So the enormous transmitter power, fully programmable antenna array, and agile frequency generation of the high-frequency active auroral research program facility in Alaska have allowed the production of unprecedented disturbances in the ionosphere. Using both pencil beams and conical or twisted beam transmissions, artificial ionization clouds have been generated near the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 6th harmonics of the electron gyro frequency. The conical beam has been used to sustain these clouds for up to 5 hours as opposed to less than 30 minutes. Whoa. Durations produced using pencil beams. The largest density plasma clouds have been produced at the highest harmonic transmissions, satellite radio transmissions at 253 megahertz from the National Research Laboratory, TAC-S at 4. Communications experiment have been severely disturbed by propagating through artificial plasma regions. The scintillation levels for UHF waves passing through artificial ionization clouds from HAARP are typically 16 decibels. This is much larger than previously reported scintillations at other HF facilities, which have been limited to 3 decibels or less. The goals of future HAARP experiments should be to build on these discoveries to sustain plasma densities larger than that of the background ionosphere for use as ionospheric reflectors of radio signals. Now, What's interesting about that, so just remember that. Now we're going to jump over to the real interesting stuff. So this is where it gets really interesting. And this is from the Scientific Journal of the Military University of Land Forces. So I'd say it's, it's pretty credible. And climate weapons, a new weapon of mass destruction, ? The traditional approach to the systematics of weapons of mass destruction emphasizes primarily chemical weapons as the most dangerous of modern means of destruction, and also include nuclear, biological, and toxic weapons. The classification has, of course, been included in the international conventions ratified by most countries around the world. This does not exclude attempts to illegally distribute, but also proliferate both ready-to-use components, materials, raw materials, devices, and above all, the knowledge in this field that is necessary to create them. Climate weapons, which are the subject of the research undertaken in this article, are technologies that influence natural phenomena. By analyzing factual material relating to broadly understood geophysical weapons, the article attempts to theoretically and methodologically justify the existence of climate weapons, determine their place in the taxonomy of weapons of mass destruction, as well as the use of technologies and dissemination methods as a modern way of conducting new generation wars, referred to in the literature as sixth generation wars. Interesting. China, they've got the sixth generation fighter jet. Or wait, are we in seventh generation now? I think it's sixth generation. And so the US is, well, we're working on our sixth generation. They've unveiled a couple of designs, like the FXX is one of them, and the 47. They look incredible, but the sixth generation is what I find very interesting. Sixth generation. This is sixth generation warfare. First generation war, cold weapons, hand-to-hand combat, galley boarding bayous and coastal zones, war on a tactical scale. Then there was the second generation, gunpowder, smoothbore weapons, contact clashes, trench warfare, sea battles, sailing fleets, coastal seas. Third generation, rifles, small arms, multi-shot artillery, land operations, steam, iron ships, various classes, sea battles, operational and strategic scale wars. Fourth generation, automatic, semi-automatic, recoil firearms, mechanized troops, tanks, aircraft carriers, submarines, front and naval operations, war on a strategic scale. And you get into fifth generation, missiles, nuclear weapons. So we've been in fifth generation since 48. Strategic war on a global scale, threats of the destruction of civilizations or separate continents. Now we get into sixth generation war, which is referred to as non-contact war, offense and defensive precision weapons, war on a strategic scale. Basic form of carrying out tasks is airspace operations using conventional weapons. The goal is to destroy the economy, command system, basic state functions, and selected military facilities. How? Climate weapons. Interesting. And it makes sense. It's something that I've been talking about now for at least 10 years. Actually longer than that, but go back to 2010, 2011. So here's what's interesting. When you talk to certain people that are very intelligent, sometimes they're so smart that they're not even willing to look at any other option. They're just going to immediately say that it's fake, it's not real, you're a conspiracy theorist. Sometimes they'll, get into insults, but they don't really offer, not always, but a lot of times certain people, when you present to them different ideas, they don't, they've got their own way of dealing with it. Anyway, so what we need to really consider is all of the data, follow the data wherever it takes us if we want to get to the bottom of things. And that's what I think is important with this right here. So when we go to, starting to digress a little bit, I apologize. What do we know about HAARP? This is what we know about HAARP. It stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. The U.S. Air Force, it was originally funded by the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, DARPA, and the University of Alaska Fairbanks is the current operator. It was designed to study how frequency radio waves interact with the ionosphere, a charged layer of Earth's upper atmosphere, which is typically, approximately, I should say, it's 60 to 600 miles up. The Ionospheric Research Instrument is 180 powerful high-frequency antennas, which are operating up to 3.6 megawatts. That's up to 3.6 million watts. What it does is it heats small, localized patches of the ionosphere to study radio wave propagation, aurora physics, communications blackouts, space weather, and effects of solar storms. This is what HAARP can measure: GPS disruptions, radio fadeouts, aurora behavior, satellite drag, radiation belts, solar flare impacts. It's like a laboratory in the sky. The reason the military has interest with HAARP and funded HAARP: submarine communications. Very low frequency waves can penetrate water and rock. That's a hell of a way to communicate. And HAARP can induce VLF waves by heating the ionosphere. Over the horizon radar, ionospheric reflection can detect aircraft missiles beyond the line of sight. The disruption resilient communication, studying how to protect military comms from solar storms, EMP weapons, and geomagnetic disturbances. Then this is speculated and unconfirmed. Missile space defense. Documents show DARPA and their interest in plasma lenses, artificial ionospheric mirrors, and enhanced radar signatures. These are research concepts, but they have fueled decades of speculation. What HAARP can't do: HAARP cannot control weather systems, create hurricanes or earthquakes. It cannot trigger mind control. It cannot manipulate tectonic plates. It cannot flood countries, and it cannot cause volcano eruptions. Why? Its beam effects and an ionospheric patch, which is 30 to 300 miles up. So the beams that it's sending from its antennas is shooting to the ionosphere, 30 to 300 miles up, not the troposphere, which is where weather occurs, and not the crust where earthquakes originate. Now, why do people think HAARP can control the weather? This is where we get into speculation here. So the military openly studied ionospheric modification. Some of the declassified papers: artificial plasma clouds. These are discussing artificial plasma clouds, heating the ionosphere, communication disruption, and plasma mirrors. Sounds like weaponization. However, in practice, this is a very small scale and not a global scale. You would need more power and more equipment around the globe, which, by the way, we're going to talk about, because China and several other nations have very powerful technologies similar to HAARP. HAARP isn't the only technology that can mess with the ionosphere. It was run by the military for decades, and there are earthquake coincidences. So let's talk about that. Large quakes happened near HAARP operations or regional events. Haiti, 2010. Chile, 2010. Japan, 2011. Now, these correlations fueled theories and no causal evidence. Or no causal evidence. I'm sorry. No causal or causal evidence. Weather anomalies and aurora spirals. HAARP experiments can produce artificial auroras, which we just looked at a couple, strange spirals, and plasma patches. What HAARP can do, confirmed, what it can do that we know it can do, it can create artificial auroras by exciting oxygen and nitrogen high in the atmosphere. It can generate ELF and VLF signals. These frequencies can travel globally, penetrate rock and ocean. That's obviously one of the reasons why the military was extremely interested in this technology, because if you can send signals through rock and through the ocean, I mean, need I say more? Yes, say more. Okay, I'll say more. Temporarily heat the ionosphere, HAARP can do. It's useful for studying space weather. It's also testing radio systems. It can create artificial plasma clouds. This has been observed and documented by NASA and the Air Force. It can also affect radio and GPS signals locally, not globally, they say, but measurable around the facility. HAARP, here's why the information is saying that HAARP cannot create an earthquake. First of all, the ionosphere is too high to affect crust pressure, and the energy HAARP emits is millions of times too small. However, researchers have used ionospheric changes to detect earthquakes after they happen. And what do we have going on right now? So lately, let's go back to this real quick. These are some current experiments with HAARP. The University of Alaska is now running HAARP. International scientists are involved, public tours are available, and they say transparent experiments. Now, here's one thing I would like to mention. If the military they've still got involvement, I mean, unofficially, I would assume. But with as much as we know about HAARP and the university controlling the show, the majority, at least from the front, from the public's perspective, there's probably other facilities now that are much more advanced and refined, and those are now the new secret projects. And then HAARP is like the public visual, the public data center for these types of experiments. But we're going to get into some other programs that are going on right now from different nations, different governments, and our own that are very, very powerful, potentially weather modification experiment or technologies, I should say. So, but this is the experiment that's going on right now through the 22nd. And these increased experiments studying solar cycle 25, the auroras, the solar storms, the communication impacts, also growth in space weather defense research, the solar max this year and next year, a potential Carrington type event. Interesting. Well, I hope Space Force is on that, because when I did an interview with somebody that was a part of Space Force several years ago, he was saying that wasn't really their biggest concern. So in more ways than one, but new experiments resembling plasma lenses. So space weather modeling is the scientific goal, and the conspiracy angle, they say, is weaponization. Why does that have to be a conspiracy angle? Well, that's because two or more people plotting something that could potentially be nefarious is considered a conspiracy, but there's different definitions now of conspiracy. There's a guy by the name of Nick Begich, I guess, that started a lot of the conspiracy theories about HAARP, allegedly. Also, Russian military accusations in the 90s, fringe documents, coincidental disasters, and misinterpretation of patents from Bernard Eastlund. The Eastlund patents. Physicist Bernard Eastlund filed patents describing heating the ionosphere, steering jet streams, hypothetical, they say, global radar, electromagnetic shielding. And HAARP's design does resemble parts of these patents. However, patents do not equal built technology. But it is interesting. Some people think that HAARP can create fake sky holograms. I don't think you'd need HAARP to do that. Hell, you could do that with other technologies, man. Global spiritual deception and directed energy projections. However, HAARP cannot produce visible 3D imagery, only faint artificial auroras. Do you remember several years ago, there was those incredible letters that showed up in the sky? I think it was over China, if I remember right. And there were these huge letters that just appeared in the sky. And this was before AI got real popular, before TikTok was a thing. And there were some good recordings of it. And it looked like some type of holographic technology, like somebody was shooting holograms. And then there was that really cool holographic UFO over Beijing about 10 years ago. It looked like a UFO. It was huge. Hundreds of thousands of people saw it. But when you look at it, you can kind of tell it's a hologram. So there's plenty of technologies out there that can be used for something similar to creating these holographic images in the sky, but that would not be HAARP. So once again, no, it's not HAARP. What else do we got? HAARP. Okay, so there are 9. This is where it gets interesting. There's 9 major facilities worldwide that perform experiments similar or partially similar to HAARP. These facilities vary in power, technique, and mission. However, they can modify, heat, and probe the ionosphere. HAARP, 3.6 million watts, 180 antennas, the world's most powerful HF ionospheric heater. Creates artificial auroras, plasma clouds, ELFs, and VLF waves. So very low frequencies, extremely low frequencies. And then in Norway, how cool is this? Actually, there was somebody listening to the show earlier from Norway. I don't know if you're still in the chat, but did you know that Norway, Sweden, and Finland, you have what is referred to as the EISCAT. EISCAT. 2 major systems relevant to HAARP-like research. The EISCAT or EISCAT Tromsø heater. This is Europe's main ionospheric heating system, producing 1.2 million watts. So about a third of HAARP. It's similar to HAARP, less powerful. They do experiments on ionospheric heating, plasma turbulence, ELFs, and VLFs. It's not, and then there's the EISCAT 3D, which is not a heater, but a super radar system, 10,000 antennas. It studies auroras, space weather, plasma structures, and this is often used with the Tromsø heater. That would be the second system similar to HAARP. Then, yeah, and just to be clear, I am not saying that these are weapons. I'm actually saying the opposite. These are used as research, potentially for weaponization, but as they're saying, no, it's more for communication. So if you're just joining the chat and you're leaving a comment like, it's not a weapon, we're not saying that it is. We're looking at what we know, we're reading into the speculation, and we're following the data. So we're actually debunking a lot of the conspiracies behind some of these technologies as this podcast continues. So the third ionospheric heating facility is in Russia. And look, we could be getting things wrong too. So I'm not saying we're 100% right here. This is just the latest data and information that we have available. So if I get something wrong, leave it in the comment section. I'll take a look at it and I'll be happy to admit if I get it wrong. So we all make mistakes once in a while, except for some people that never make mistakes and they're perfect, especially those in the chat. You know who I'm talking about. Then you've got the SURA ionospheric heating facility in Russia, located near Nizhny Novgorod. It has 3 different transmitters producing up to 2.25 million watts. Well, oh yeah, there are climate weapons. We're not saying that that doesn't exist. We're looking at the theory of climate weapons, but we're not saying these are climate weapons. We're talking about, man, you guys are funny. Somebody in the chat goes, it literally says climate weapons behind Rex, LOL. You're right. There is a thumbnail behind me that says climate weapons. We'll get into that in a minute. That's all in theory. That's all in theory. All right, here we go. The SURA ionospheric heating facility in Russia, located near Nizhny Novgorod, 2.25 million watts. This is the closest Russian counterpart to HAARP. It's been used since the 80s, and it conducts plasma cloud experiments similar to HAARP. Number 4, in Puerto Rico. This was destroyed in 2020. The Arecibo Observatory. This was one of the world's ionosphere facilities, a 305-meter dish that collapsed. I think this is where isn't this where they sent out a signal and then space aliens allegedly got back to us and just shortly after? This only had minimal heating capability of 80 kilowatts, but it had a strong radar for plasma research. Important for ionospheric modification experiments in past decades. So number 4 is gone. Number 5 is alive. The Hicamarca Radio Observatory in Lima, Peru, the world's largest VHF radar. It's not a heater, but it measures ionospheric irregularities. It studies plasma waves. It tracks equatorial ionosphere behavior, and it's often cited in similar scientific fields. Number 6, this is inactive, they say. This is in Alaska. This was before HAARP. It is an older U.S. heater with a 70-meter antenna and 1.2 megawatts, conducting ELF and VLF generation and auroral studies. It was decommissioned when HAARP came online. Number 7, the Alamos LiDAR Observatory in Norway. It's not a heater. However, it does use lasers and LiDAR to study upper atmosphere, monitor auroras, observe noctilucent clouds, and plasma phenomena. It's often used in tandem with the EISCAT heater for coordinated experiments. Then in China, we've got the Wuhan Ionospheric Observatory. This is China's main ionospheric modification site. It conducts HF heating, plasma experiments, radio propagation studies. It is less publicly documented than HAARP and EISCAT. It is often compared to HAARP in geopolitical discussions. Then the South China Sea in China, the Sanya Ionospheric Facility. This is a newer facility, strong heating capabilities. Chinese media has explicitly compared it to HAARP. It's used for space weather research, communications research, HF heating tests. Yeah, 1.3 megawatts is, or 1.2 megawatts is 1.2 million watts. So when I'm biking up Wolf Creek Pass and like I'm just, if I'm averaging over 200 watts for 20 minutes, that's pretty good. Like the pros, they might be in the 250 to 300 watt, maybe even 400 watt when you get into like Pagacha. He might even be a little bit higher than that. But just in a comparison, when you're working out as hard as you can, like if I'm peaking at around 650 to 750 watts for short bursts, just as hard as I can. And I ride my bike. I try and get at least 100 miles a weekend. You've got a stereo system. You turn up your stereo system, 100 watts, turn it up, 100 watts. That's freaking loud. Now imagine 1 million watts shooting into the ionosphere. That's a lot of power. So when you've got HAARP pushing 3.5 million watts of power, we're talking some serious power. So next, the Sanya ionospheric facility. And then there are smaller and specialized ionospheric instruments, such as the Super Darn radars. That is a global network of 35 HF radars. The Ionosons, over 200 of those worldwide. GPS, scintillation monitors, magnetometers, VLF, ELF receivers. They don't heat the ionosphere, but they track the effects of space weather and ionospheric disturbances. So there's 5 strict ionospheric heaters that are true HAARP equivalents. Maybe not in power, but in technology. So we've got HAARP, EISCAT, SURA, HYPASS, and the Chinese facilities in Wuhan and Sanya. Then there's a broad atmospheric ionospheric research instrument setup that includes radars, ionosons, and plasma systems, 400 plus worldwide, but only 9 to 10 of those are major city centers. Now let's get into the potential for weapons and the potential for 6th generation warfare and weather wars, which have been talked about for decades. This right here, what you're looking at, is from the Research Projects versus Weather and Climate Disasters at the Scientific Journal of the Military University of Land Forces. This is showing that in 2022 alone, there was $165 billion in weather and climate disasters. This is a chart showing the spikes in disasters. It looks like 2017 has the most, but just 2022, 165 billion. These are 4 different facilities that can heat the ionosphere. As you can see, we've got EISCAT, HAARP, FAST, and SURA. So if, and this is where the speculation comes in, and this is why it would be a very powerful weapon for a military to have access to, if you can modify the weather and stimulate floods, stimulate drought, stimulate blizzards, tornadoes, hurricanes, steer hurricanes, tornadoes, etc. If that would be considered 6th generation warfare. Fascinating. Now, what I also see connected with 6th generation warfare is 6th generation communications, 6G, using terahertz frequencies. I think that'll be a backbone. I think that there will potentially be weapons and technologies that are similar to what we think of when we see UFOs that appear and then disappear that aren't artificial intelligence. Boom. If you can appear and disappear anywhere in the world at any time, that reminds me of the technology that was being referred to by the Delta Special Forces guy that died in the Tesla, something about the manifesto where China and the US had technologies that allowed them to basically do what I just explained in different words. So, matter of fact, let's look at that real quick. Let's look at that. I think that we should get into that. What did the Delta guy say that died in Tesla out in time? Decorated Army Special Forces soldier Matthew Livelsberger claimed that the U.S. and China possesses gravitic propulsion systems, a form of anti-gravity technology. In an alleged manifesto and email sent before he died by suicide in a Tesla Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas, January 2025, Livelsberger made several claims regarding this technology. He asserted that both the U.S. and China have advanced gravitic propulsion systems that power high-speed unmanned stealth aircraft. He described these systems as the most dangerous threat to national security that ever existed. He claimed that mysterious drone sightings along the East Coast were, in fact, these advanced drones, which he alleged were deployed by China from submarines in the Atlantic Ocean for surveillance and as a show of force. He urged the U.S. government to disclose information about this technology. However, investigators found no evidence to support his claims of being tracked by federal authorities or that his act was part of a larger conspiracy. Authorities have primarily attributed his actions to mental health struggles, specifically post-traumatic stress disorder and personal issues. Oh, man. Would you like to buy a timeshare? It's from Gaslighting Incorporated. Wow. Okay. So we can't confirm or deny. Well, we can deny, but we can't confirm. But we can definitely deny. Here are some patents and research documents that describe methods for weather modification, including proposals to use jet engines to dispense aerosols to create clouds, some involving specific fuel additives or dispensing systems. Now, I need to make it very clear, just because there's patents out there. So if you're leaving a comment, or if you're going to leave a comment that says, just because there's a patent doesn't mean it's real, doesn't mean it exists. I know this is I've explained that multiple times in this podcast, so I just need to explain it again. Just because there's a patent for it doesn't mean it's real, doesn't mean that the technology exists. But let's look at the patents. Several specific patents and applications that discuss using aircraft for cloud creation or weather modification include, and this is one thing that I thought was interesting, because my friend that I was disagreeing with the other day about contrails and geoengineering and weather modification, like, I agree with him on most of what he says, but when he says that there's no such thing as chemtrails, and then you're getting into like verbiage. Because first of all, to discredit somebody's own personal experiences is not very smart, first of all, and it's rude. And if you really want to know the truth, you should listen to somebody's personal experience or experiences. I have had personal experiences where there's been times where, as an example, 2013, Colorado Springs, I'm working on the road. I'm with a couple of my coworkers. We're taking a walk in the daytime, in the early, not early morning, but in the 10-ish a.m., probably 9, 10 a.m. We're walking, and you can, the planes are flying, large, what looks like commercial airliners are flying, and the contrails that they're leaving behind them. We were literally watching what looked like particulates falling from these trails. It looked like, I don't know, pieces of something really. And I wasn't the only one that noticed it. My coworkers I've got polarized glasses on. My coworker's got glasses on. She sees it. She's not even a conspiracy theorist. At that time, I would definitely label myself as a conspiracy theorist. Now I've debunked more conspiracies than I do create them. But anyway, so I'm like, we're watching what looks like stuff falling from the sky. And it looks like little pieces, they look more square than round. So to us, it looked like something was falling from the sky, from these trails. When I was in San Antonio, I remember one day I was working in downtown San Antonio. I think this was around 2011. 2011, right around there, maybe 2012. I think it was 2011. And downtown San Antonio, and these smaller craft are flying quite low, and they were leaving these X's in the sky. They're leaving these X's in the sky, and it wasn't commercial airliners. These were smaller planes. And downtown San Antonio, not very high, but it looked like they were much lower than your traditional aircraft, especially to be in a city like that. And, I don't know what the airspace requirements are for craft out there, but we could see they were spraying all these X's, and these X's were, dissipating. So that didn't look like your typical airliner or your typical commercial jet. Those were personal experiences I had. I saw that. Now, what my friend said, which was interesting, and I'm willing to look at the possibility, was he said what we were seeing in Colorado Springs when all that stuff was falling from the sky, he said it was actually rain, basically precipitation that we were seeing. And it might have been. So I'm willing to look at that option, but I'm certainly not convinced that's what it was, because these things were flying lower than normal, and it was thick. It was thick. Whatever was falling down was extremely thick. So I said to him, look, and then he made this point about how, so you're telling me that there's 1 million airplanes that are flying constantly, spraying the clouds and spraying the atmosphere, creating clouds. I said, no, I didn't say that, because I didn't say that. I didn't say anything close to that. I had mentioned the possibility of a additive being added to the jet fuel, because jets and planes are constantly flying in specific X patterns anyway. So if you could put something in the fuel that could help create cloud cover, that could be a form of geoengineering, weather modification. And so now I'm sharing with you some different patents related to that possibility. Once again, just because it's a patent doesn't mean it's real, but let's look at what they say here. When I say real, I mean real technology that's active and in use. It's a real patent, but is it a real technology that's in use right now? I would think, I don't know. Let's talk about it. So the first one, US 201-000-71771, high altitude atmospheric injection system and related methods. This patent application discusses systems and methods for high altitude atmospheric alteration, which could involve the injection of materials. The next one, US 202-1022-1509. Aircraft aerosol dispensing method, apparatus, and system. This application describes methods, apparatus, and systems for generating plumes or cloud bursts or reflective aerosol from an aircraft. And one place you may want to look for potential aircraft that specifically are a part of a geoengineering project would be a military base in California. Next one, US 200-900-32214. This application process or proposes the use of sun shading aircraft fuels and sprays to be burned or sprayed at high altitudes to mitigate global warming by reflecting sunlight. It explicitly mentions the idea of adding inert sun shading components to jet fuel and discusses using two types of fuel: standard for takeoff, landing, and sun shading for high altitude flights. Oh, you don't say. You wouldn't need 1 million aircraft. You wouldn't need to spend an exuberant amount of additional money because now you just have an additive that you put in the fuel, and then commercial flights are going that way anyway, and those companies are making money flying people from point A to point B. All they have to do is put an additive in their fuel. Brilliant. Then WO 2022015204. A1. Method and device for creating artificial clouds and precipitation. This international application describes a method for creating artificial clouds and precipitation by initiating updrafts using a jet engine and introducing 3 types of hygroscopic aerosols into the jet stream. Then the last one that we see here, and there's many more, but we're just going to mention a few. This is US 11330768B2. Systems and methods for producing rain clouds. This patent describes systems and methods for generating low altitude clouds saturated with moisture over bodies of water to produce rain downwind. So just a few patents. Once again, doesn't mean it's technology that's in use, but if you were going to create, or if you did need to geoengineer the planet and not have 1 million specific aircraft to do it, why don't you take the ones that are already out there and just add something to the jet fuel? I don't know. Anyway, so where do we go from here? Let's go to Los Alamos. This is where it gets very interesting also. I keep saying that, but it's pretty freaking interesting. LANL, Los Alamos National Labs, does not operate a HAARP-style ionospheric heater, but it does run and develop multiple overlapping systems in the fields of electromagnetic pulse, which is EMP research, directed energy technologies, particle beams, high altitude atmospheric physics, plasma generation, nuclear effects on the ionosphere, space weather modeling, ELF and VLF generation concepts, radar and ionospheric propagation science. Los Alamos National Labs involvement is bigger than most people realize. They inherited a large part of the original classified ionospheric modification research programs from the Cold War. So let's talk about some different experiments which literally affected the ionosphere, which could have potentially been used for weapons. 1, nuclear ionospheric modification programs. Historic and also foundational. Los Alamos developed the physics behind the high-altitude nuclear tests that altered the ionosphere, the original HAARP. Starfish Prime. This is from 1962. I love that name, Starfish Prime. A 1.4 megaton nuclear detonation at 250 miles altitude. This was in 1962. This created an artificial radiation belt. Lovely. An artificial radiation belt. Oh, that's delightful. Damaged satellites, temporarily changed the ionosphere. LANL, Los Alamos National Labs, designed the physics, modeling, and diagnostics. So that's 1. Number 2, you've all heard of Operation Fishbowl. This is a series of upper atmosphere detonations that created artificial auroras, triggered large electromagnetic pulses, and ionized massive regions of the sky. These programs laid the groundwork for HAARP's non-nuclear version of ionospheric manipulation, and LANL continues to model these effects today. What about directed energy programs? I like the name, directed energy program. It's just a program. It's just a program. It's a directed energy program. The LANL leads the United States development of several high-power directed energy systems. High-energy lasers, they call this HEL. Space and air defense, plasma formation, beam propagation through the atmosphere. This is relevant because HAARP also deals with plasma physics and atmospheric propagation. Then we've got neutral particle beam research, space-based beam concepts from the Star Wars program. Remember that? SDI. This overlaps with plasma generation, ionospheric propagation, and high-altitude energy deposition. We've also got high-power microwave weapons, HPMs. High-power microwave weapons. This is pretty cool. These high-power microwave weapons disrupt electronics, interact with plasma, and propagate into the ionosphere. These are also frequently compared to HAARP's radio wave effects. Then there's a magnetohydrodynamics hydrodynamics. He's a part of the X-Men. Oh, wait, he's one of the Nemesis dudes. Magnetohydrodynamics and plasma physics. Oh, I love that. Just the name. Space plasmas, Earth's magnetosphere, ionospheric turbulence, plasma wave generation, including ELF and VLS. Their plasma physics group runs large-scale plasma chambers, particle in-cell modeling systems, electromagnetic simulation supercomputers. Wow. This research overlaps with HAARP, artificial plasma cloud experiments, the ELF, VLF wave generation, aurora modification, space weather modeling. We've got space weather and ionosphere modeling programs. The Los Alamos National Lab operates space weather satellites and codes that predict and simulate ionospheric effects, simulating ionospheric heating, radiation belts, plasma instabilities, solar storm impacts. These simulations have been used by DARPA, the Air Force Research Lab, HAARP scientists, and data from LANL satellites often supports HAARP experiments. Okay, so when we get into the VLF and the ELF research, Los Alamos also helped develop submarine communication, ELF, VLF systems, lightning-triggered VLF wave experiments, VLF propagation modeling, radiation belt remediation concepts, ways to get rid of the radiation. Oh, that's interesting. That makes me think of the Hutchinson effect. I need to look into that again. Maybe not. Maybe I should just forget about it. You will forget you ever heard me say anything about John Hutchinson effect. Put on the Ray-Bans. Put on the Ray-Bans. Los Alamos National Labs also does extensive research in over-the-horizon radar, nuclear EMP radio propagation, high-frequency radio blackout modeling, and radar through plasma. What about GPS disruption, space communications? GPS, ionospheric scintillation, HF, communication dropouts, solar storm impacts on military systems. Some of the largest classified data sets LANL holds on HF propagation, ionospheric irregularities, nuclear-induced blackout scenarios. Oh, man. Well, that's not nearly as cool as a large plasma device collaboration. UCLA and Los Alamos is working on a 20-meter plasma chamber, one of the world's largest controlled plasma facilities, studying Alphen waves. Do you remember Alf? Freaking Alf was the man. Well, I mean, he was a space alien, but he was the man. Alpha waves, plasma wave interactions, radiation belt physics. Oh, I love it. This research is comparable to HAARP's artificial plasma turbulence, HAARP's alpha wave experiments, and high altitude plasma heating. See, I mean, you don't even need a drink. You can just hang out with me. Do you want to really trip out? Check this out. I was compared to Max Headroom the other day. Somebody said, he's Max Headroom, but the future. Take that as a compliment. Alf did eat cats. That's one of the things I like about Alf. I could use an Alf right now. We got 2 cats. Anybody know where I can get an Alf? Okay. Back to the podcast. So speaking of alpha waves and plasma wave interactions, radiation belt physics, how about rings? Radiation belt remediation, using very low frequency waves to deplete radiation belts, similar to HAARP VLF experiments. Now, that could actually be very beneficial to mankind. Because if we can deplete radiation belts with very low frequencies, like what happens when the magnetosphere weakens to the point of we've got so much more solar radiation coming in from the sun and the stars and space? Or what happens if there's a nuclear war or a dirty bomb? This type of technology could be used for good because this could potentially deplete the radiation that's being emitted. I like that. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. Then we've got the Nike, not Adidas, but Nike plasma mirror experiments. Forget about Reebok. This is Nike, baby. Testing whether artificial plasma layers can reflect radio or laser beams. This is similar to ionospheric mirrors and HAARP's plasma lens concepts. Then we've got IcePick and Magic codes, which are advanced electromagnetic modeling for HF heating, plasma propagation, nonlinear ionospheric behaviors. So HAARP does not have an equivalent heater, or I'm sorry, let me repeat that. Los Alamos does not have a equivalent heater to HAARP, but the world's most advanced nuclear ionospheric modification research archives, directed energy and microwave weapon programs, potentially, maybe not. Maybe that was just a joke. That's the live action role play part. Deep plasma physics and ionospheric modeling, ELF and VLF communication and wave generation programs, experiments that simulate HAARP's plasma effects, space weather satellites that track HAARP experiments, modeling for ionospheric heating similar to HAARP. So, wow. Pretty interesting. What else? So let's go back to this Scientific Journal of Military University of Land Forces. Check this out. This article examines the concept of climate weapons, technologies designed to influence natural phenomena like weather and the ionosphere, and asks whether they should be considered a form of weapons of mass destruction. It explores whether these technologies exist or could exist, their place in the WMD spectrum or level, and their role in modern warfare, which is considered sixth generation war if those technologies exist. Traditional WMDs, we've talked about that. These climate weapons are not explicitly addressed in major treaties, yet the author argues they may belong in the WMD category due to their potential scope and effects. This article also reviews existing and hypothetical technologies that could affect the environment, ionospheric heating, weather modification, geoengineering for military use, and geophysical weapons. It also analyzes factual material or near factual pertaining to geophysical weapons and argues for the theoretical possibility of climate weapons. Such weapons would shift warfare from direct kinetic confrontation to non-contact geophysical environmental manipulation, which is sixth generation war. The paper also suggests that control over weather, ionosphere, natural systems could provide strategic advantage disruption of infrastructure, communications, agriculture, and social order. You know that Iran is in a 50-year drought right now? Interesting, right? The author also, and I think North Korea is dealing with like one of the biggest droughts in modern history. Interesting. The author attempts to classify climate weapons, placing them in relation to WMD categories. The paper discusses how dissemination of known materials, devices could lead to proliferation of such weapons, and also policy and ethical considerations. So, the author also argues that though full operational climate weapons with large-scale destructive capabilities may still be largely theoretical or in their early stages, there is enough evidence and plausible capability to treat them as potential weapons of mass destruction class. The presence of high-tech research, ionospheric modification, weather modification, plasma physics, and increasing militarization of environmental systems suggests this is a growing domain of strategic importance. It calls for policy attention, regulatory updates, transparency, and more research and the implications of such technology. Also, at the same time, the author cautions that the actual impact of climate weapons will depend on many interacting factors such as technology, environment, scale, infrastructure, vulnerability. So blanket censorship or alarm isn't the point, rather informed oversight is. I like it. I like it a lot. Here, let me show you this. Check this out. Oh, the Jinn are drinking all the water in Iran. Good one, Gizmo. Nice. That was good. So here's the ionospheric heaters that we know about. Atmosphere and weather impact. These are systems that actually heat the ionosphere with high-frequency radio waves. HAARP, you can see at the top with the 3.6 megawatts, which is 3.6 million watts. The SURA in Russia, that's Russia's version of HAARP. The EISCAT and EISCAT 3D, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. The Chinese ionospheric heaters, the Wuhan and Sanya. These are China's HAARP class facilities. Then we've got weather modification technologies that are mentioned, such as climate manipulation, geoengineering, and weather control. Cloud seeding programs that we know about, the USA, China, the UAE, Russia. Cloud seeding programs typically involve silver iodide or dry ice, which is used for rain enhancement, hail suppression, and storm weakening. If the clouds are already there, experts suggest that you have a 5 to 12% increase potentially for rainfall or snow. Now, some projects that have actually taken place, there's what's called Project Storm Fury from the 1960s to the 80s. This was attempts to weaken hurricanes by seeding eye wall clouds. This is a very, very interesting project that we should definitely get to know more about. This is China's Sky River project, massive rain enhancement operation over Tibet using rockets, burners, cloud seeding, the largest weather control program in world history. You know, that also reminds me, when I worked in the Northwest, I worked in Federal Way for a while, and during the Beijing Olympics, they were doing programs to prevent clouds. And I met a gal that was a part of that project because she came into a timeshare presentation, because during that time I was selling timeshare. I know I'm probably going to go to hell. I've asked for forgiveness many times, but I was just a kid, man. And so anyway, I remember this gal came in from China, and she was a part of that, like that whole project where they were launching rockets into the atmosphere in attempts to change the weather for the Olympics. It was pretty cool. She was a nice, very nice lady. Very, very nice. But anyway, so we've got Project Storm Fury, China's Sky River project, and geoengineering proposals. Now, these are proposals, they say, solar radiation management, such as stratospheric aerosol injection, marine cloud brightening, space mirrors. These remain mostly theoretical, but are under research by Harvard, NOAA, the UK Met Office, private research foundations. Yeah, like I know of a couple names that love you so much. philanthropists that love you so much. The author calls these systems natural phenomena manipulation tools and places them in the level of potential climate weapons. Then there's geophysical tectonic influence technologies. The article also discusses geophysical weapons, including triggering natural events. Real-world connections are sensitive but historically documented, such as the high-altitude nuclear tests, not only by the U.S., but the USSR, Starfish Prime, the Tsar Bomba atmospheric tests that created artificial auroras, long-lasting ionospheric damage, EM pulse waves, global radio disruptions. And then the Los Alamos National Laboratory was involved, the Sandia National Labs, and Soviet Arzamas 16 and Chelyabinsk 70. Chelyabinsk. Sorry, couldn't help it. Acoustic seismo-acoustic research systems, such a dork, used to detect or predict earthquakes. Theoretical weaponization considered but not confirmed. DARPA's deep earth tomography. Russia's seismo-acoustic generators. Classified Soviet weapon research, which has been documented by Sakharov and others. So these are used to predict earthquakes. Theoretically, weaponization is considered but not confirmed. Then we've got ELF and VLF wave injection. HAARP and SURA can create ELF waves which penetrate seawater, rock. These are primarily used for submarine communications and radiation belt research, but the article points out dual use potential. Then the article goes on to say these are the clearest examples of geophysical weapons as the author defines them, tools capable of altering Earth's systems. Then category 4, electromagnetic and directed energy systems. The article cites military interest in environmental modification during sixth-generation warfare. This maps directly to classified programs in the US, Russia, and China. High-power microwave systems. Los Alamos, Sandia, Raytheon, US Air Force research. Disabling electronics, some of the applications, disabling electronics, disrupting radar, and coupling with atmospheric plasma. Then laser atmospheric experiments, adaptive optics, the US Air Force Starfire optical range, DARPA, Boeing, ABL. Lasers create guide stars by exciting atmospheric sodium layers, an actual example of altering the atmosphere with beams. For peaceful purposes only, folks, just for research purposes. We promise, we swear. Plasma mirrors, plasma lenses, DARPA and Los Alamos research. These technologies involve creating artificial plasma layers, reflecting or focusing energy weapons, modifying electromagnetic propagation, particle beam concepts, Star Wars, developed under the SDI project, neutral particle beams, charged particle beams. And these studies do continue with Los Alamos, DARPA, and Lawrence Livermore. These technologies could absolutely affect huge populations, disrupt critical infrastructure, manipulate natural systems, operate anonymously, and be used without traditional warfare. So, does it mean it's real? No, it could be all made up, but it is very interesting. So, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a beautiful day. I thought this was only going to be like 15 minutes, but I went over an hour. So, I hope you enjoyed it, and hit the bell if you would. Hit this for all notifications. Check us out on Patreon. The discount's still good. Rex20, get 20% off your order at boomerboost.com. Get the Gladiator Barley, the Boomer Boost combo. You'll thank me later. Try it for 30 days. Let me know how you feel. And be the change you want to see, everybody. And don't get a HAARP on unless you like it.